Hey, good day, students, and welcome back to Mr. Lawhon's AP European History Notes. Sorry about my voice today, but as you guys know, I stayed home sick. Should be back tomorrow. Everything will be all right. Today, we're going to talk about Essential Question 3.6, and we're going to talk about, guys, how the Catholic Church is going to fix some of the problems that Protestants have been talking about for a very long time. Now, real quick, before we begin, my father-in-law has been up here for the last couple days, and my father-in-law used to be a professor of church history at Azusa Pacific University, and he informed me that in one of my notes, I said that there were 8 sacraments that the Catholic Church believed in. Guys, there were not 8 sacraments. There were 7. So I apologize for that. I mean, not that that's a really big deal, but yes, the Catholic Church believed in 7 sacraments, and Martin Luther said there's only 2 sacraments. Anyway, beside the point, let's talk about, guys, this thing called the Counter Reformation or the Catholic Reformation. Pause if you need to. So, let's talk about how, at first, um, Catholic priests and Catholic intellectuals were not ignorant about the problems in the Catholic Church. They'd been calling for reform for a while, and they are going to kind of use this opportunity to kind of kick those reforms into gear. So, one of the ways that the Catholic Church is going to respond to Martin Luther and Luther's ideas is to do some internal reforms. And the very first thing that it does is it starts creating these new religious orders. All right. So you might be like, what is a religious order? Well, guys, there are different groups of monks within the Catholic Church, and those monks have different roles and different focuses. So during this time period, new groups are going to emerge whose goals were to focus on very specific reforms that kind of appealed to their group. All right. So the first group we're going to talk about are the Theatines, all right? The Theatines' goal was to teach reform-minded monks for higher levels of church office. They are gonna get together and they're gonna teach each other and teach their students changes that the Catholic Church needs to make and how to be kind of open-minded about changes. And we'll talk about some of those changes when we get to this thing called the Council of Trent. But like I said, the Catholic Church is not ignorant of the problems within itself. It knows very well of the corruption. It knows the things that people are saying are true. It knows that the church has kind of fallen away from spiritual matters at the higher levels of the clergy. And the goal of the Theatines is to teach people that are going to be in the higher levels of the clergy in the future how to be sensitive to the needs of the people. The second group are called the Capuchins, and these are monks whose goal was to focus on teaching ordinary people at the bottom of society. If you remember, we talked about one of the criticisms of the Catholic Church is that you would have like bishops that have a benefice, they have a church office in an area. And part of their responsibility is to go into the towns and to preach to the people of the town. But most of the time, the bishops don't even live in the diocese that they are supposed to live in. They just collect taxes from there, and they don't go in there, and they don't preach, and they don't minister to the people. Well, the goal of the Capuchins is to be with ordinary people ministering at the bottom of society. Another group are called the Somachi and the Barnabites. And those monks' purpose was to minister to people affected by war. Specifically in Italy, we talked about how the Italian city of Rome was sacked in the last notes because these mercenaries that were unpaid just went throughout the town wreaking havoc and trying to take money where they could. And they caused a lot of destruction. And any time in war, the people that are hurt the most are just everyday, ordinary bystanders. So the Samashi and the Barnabites, they would go into these war-torn places and they would try to help people. Another group are called the Ursulines. These established convents to focus on the religious education for women. So you're going to see women that might go into being a nun. They created more of these more of these convents so that women could be educated to be in service for the church. But all of these are trying to make changes in the church, and all of these are a response, in some ways, to a lot of the criticisms that Protestants are now throwing out there. And they are going to make Catholic priests a whole lot more visible to the people. Pause if you need to. Okay, now, the big reformer that gets the credit for starting what's going to be called the Counter Reformation or the Catholic Reformation is Ignatius Loyola. So, Ignatius Loyola used to be a soldier, and he is going to start a group called the Jesuits. Now, the Jesuits are going to be from this point on, a very powerful force, not only in Europe, but all over the world. Every time Europeans are going to set up colonies all over the world, the Jesuits are going to be there. So he was a reform-minded priest. He was a soldier in his youth, and he comes to the priesthood because he gets injured in a battle. And as he's recovering, he spends a lot of time reading about the heroic deeds of the Christian saints. All right. Now, the Christian saints, guys, are people that the Catholic Church have granted sainthood to for their service. And he goes around, a lot of them, are the apostles and other groups, but he reads a lot of what the saints struggled with, and a lot of how they were treated, and a lot of how they faced hardships, and they overcame these hardships to preach Christ. And he is going to see himself a soldier also facing hardships as one of these guys that is going to be the next big, the next big soldier for Christ, I guess. Now, between 1522 and 1524, he writes his work that he gets, a lot of he's known for throughout history and throughout church history as writing this book called The Spiritual Exercises. Now, what are the spiritual exercises? Well, he's a soldier after all, and he makes this handbook that basically teaches individuals mental exercises to gain control over their emotions. He kind of teaches, it's almost like a self-help book. How do you discipline your body and your mind to be a better Christian? And he has all of these tips and all these advices, and it teaches a person basically that they could shape their own behavior through study and practice, right? That basically, sometimes there's this old saying among Christians or whatever, when you do something bad, oh, the devil made me do it. Well, Ignatius Loyola is going to kind of get rid of that idea that the devil didn't make you do anything. Basically, you are in control of yourself, and you can be control of your emotions and your own behaviors. Now, that's not to say that the devil, he obviously, guys, as a Christian, he believed that the devil certainly tempted and put pressures on humanity, but he very much believed that you could be in control of yourself. And what this book does was, by teaching these ideas, a lot of Protestants that became Protestant from the Catholic Church would read his ideas, and it brought a lot of these people back to the Catholic Church, and it taught them to deny themselves and to submit to church teachings. It also kind of taught themselves that by going over to Protestantism, they were kind of losing control of their spirit and their discipline, and this book taught you how to discipline yourself and bring you back to what Loyola would have thought, and all of these guys would have thought was the one true belief, the Roman Catholic Church. So anyway, his spiritual exercises are going to play a big role into bringing people back. So you see, guys, the Roman Catholic Church is not just sitting by idle. They are making changes, and they are trying to deal with a lot of these criticisms against the church that Luther brought out. Pause if you need to. Oh yeah, he won a lot of Catholic Protestants back to the Catholic Church. I think I said that. Anyway, pause if you need to. Okay, the big one, the Council of Trent. Well, guys, a lot of Catholic leaders are going to get around, and Pope Paul III is going to call a church council to deal with religious conflicts. Like I said, maybe in the notes I kind of made it sound like the church was being obstinate. They were being like, we're not going to listen, we're not going to change anything. But it's not the case. Throughout this whole time, they are slowly moderating their teachings, and they are slowly making changes to deal with Luther's ideas and Calvin's ideas and all these guys' ideas. So Pope Paul III calls a church council, And the idea is, how do we deal with this religious conflict? How do we deal with these criticisms? How do we deal with all of these wars? Now, before he calls this meeting, he had this guy named Caspar Contarini. And he said before this council ever got called, he said, hey, I want you to go and I want you to do some research and I want you to find out how much of these criticisms that Luther and everybody are leveling at the church are true. So Caspar Contarini goes out to research these church problems and collect data. But the data was so damning to the Catholic Church and it was so critical of the Catholic Church, Paul III said, we can't publish this. It'll make us look really bad. Well, guys, as you know, Protestants have their ways, and they got a hold of some of this data, and what did they do? They put it they put it to the printing presses and spread the idea out there anyway, which made the Catholic Church look even worse than it already did in the minds of many Protestants. Man, guys, look at the role of the printing press, right? If you want to get an idea out there, you just print it, right? And it spreads all over. Man, imagine if they had Twitter or X or whatever it's called, or any kind of social media back in the day, it would have spread even faster. All right, now, the Council of Trent lasts from 1545 to 1563. Now, don't fool yourself. It wasn't like a big meeting that literally lasted for almost 20 years. The council met 3 times over 18 years with 4 different popes as president, or as, the presiding leader. Now, why did they meet over, 3 times, 18 years? Why did it take so long, guys? Well, there's wars going on, and you might have a council meeting, and then war breaks out, and then you've got to stop the meeting. You got to go deal with war, and then you kind of come back after things calm down. So, anyway, like wars, like the 30 Years' War didn't literally last 30 years of nonstop battles. There were lulls. Same thing with the Council of Trent. But over these 18 years, they are going to make changes to the Catholic Church, but they are also going to reaffirm some of their beliefs, and they're going to stand hard in those beliefs. So pause if you need to, and let's talk about what the Council of Trent comes up with. All right, so the council imposed reforms. All right, they are going to make some changes, such as, number 1, it acknowledges the fact that maybe it's not so great that bishops are, buying benefices, paying money, to the highest bidder, benefices are getting sold, and those bishops don't have to even live in the area that they're supposed to minister to. So it forces bishops, number 1, to serve in the areas they controlled. And guys, that goes way back to Erasmus and John Hus. All of these guys, they are fixing these problems. They said, look, the Catholic Church is focused on wealth, and they're selling offices to the highest bidder, and the bishops don't even have to live there. Well, they're going to fix that. Number 2, it says that also, the Council of Trent says, if you are a bishop, you have to go out and you have to be visible to the people. They need to see you. You need to minister them. You need to preach to them. Once again, a heavy criticism of the Roman Catholic Church that had been going back long before Martin Luther posted his 95 Theses. Now, another thing, priests were required to be better educated. Let's stop right there for a second. Remember, Martin Luther, for the first time he read the Bible, he had to go to the university to learn the Bible. Not every priest read the Bible or had access to the Bible. So this is requiring priests to know the Bible. And that way, when somebody tries to call them out and refute them, then they are taught verses in the Bible to back themselves up. So priests from now on have to be better educated. Another thing it did was it reaffirmed the priesthood's belief in celibacy. So it did not change the fact, Martin Luther and Zwingli and all these guys are saying priests should be able to be married. These guys say, nope, priests should still be celibate. So even though they are making reforms, they are now going to start sticking to their guns. They're going to start sticking to their original teachings. So the Council of Trent does reiterate, hey, priests must be celibate, and they must be active among the people. It also said, I don't care what Martin Luther says, good works are a part of salvation. All right, it reaffirmed the 7 sacraments. Once again, guys, the Catholic Church believed that there were 7 sacraments, not 8. I made a mistake in earlier notes. But 7 sacraments, not just 2, which is what Martin Luther was saying. And guys, the Council of Trent said transubstantiation is real. The physical presence of Jesus is in the body, or is in the bread and the wine, which is different than what Zwingli was saying, which was the spiritual presence of Jesus. So they are reaffirming transubstantiation, even though Martin Luther also believed in transubstantiation. All right, now, it also reaffirmed purgatory. Now, Martin Luther is going to say, look, purgatory is not a real thing. But the Catholic Church is going to say, yes, very much, purgatory is real. It is going to reaffirm that it's okay to venerate or honor the saints and pray to the saints. And it's still going to say that relics are a big deal. It's okay to have relics in churches. Now, who's criticizing relics? Well, guys, John Calvin's a big one. They're going around trashing churches that have altars and relics and things like that and images. It's going to say those things are okay. So once again, you see the Council of Trent making some reforms, but very much saying that no, these things are valid. Now, it reaffirmed indulgences. However, all right, excuse me, it reaffirmed indulgences. However, they are going to start selling indulgences less and less and less. And by the 1560s, they're going to outlaw the selling of indulgences altogether. Now, they're not going to say indulgences aren't a thing. To this day, indulgences can be granted, but they cannot be paid for. All right? So basically, by the 1560s, selling indulgences is going to be outlawed. But, guys, they are going to reaffirm that indulgences are real and indulgences are okay. Now, you might be like, why are they going to stick to this selling of indulgences? Well, guys, in the next chapter, we're going to learn about this. But the Catholic Church is building this thing called St. Peter's Basilica. And it is a massive, beautiful, wealthy, ornate building that is going to be at the Vatican. And we'll talk about that in the next chapter. So, guys, it cost a lot of money. So they are going to still sell indulgences, partly because they still need to keep building St. Peter's Basilica. So anyway, what you've seen is, in this short episode of the notes here, guys, you have seen the Catholic Church trying to make some changes, but also very much sticking to their original doctrines. Guys, that's the end of the notes. I'll see you back in class tomorrow.